Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Without a doubt, one of the hardest parts about being a leader is that we have to embrace solitude. In this series, we're looking at the various dimensions or kinds of solitude that leaders embrace and how Jesus meets each one of us along the way. In this fourth part of our series, we focus in on the solitude of risks, on the fact that when we decide to act, we inevitably have to act alone. Or do we? Perhaps it's in our greatest solitude that we find union with Christ. Hey everybody, I'm glad to be back with you again and so excited about this series. I just love doing this. It's fascinating to me because we're doing something that you just don't hear a lot about. I mean, most people will just say, hey, look, leadership, it makes you lonely at the top. You have to carry the brunt of things. You have to kind of be alone. And remember, even if you're not in an organization where this is, quite literally true, anyone who's responsible for their actions, wherever you are, that makes you a leader. And being responsible for your action puts you in a kind of solitude, the solitude of your identity, of your name. I mean, when someone says, this is a stance I'm going to take on things, this is who I am and what I live for, well, I mean, no one else can be you but you, right? So when you publicly say, this is who I am, either on a social issue or in a decision that you have to make with your family around you, your friends around you, you're embracing a type of beautiful solitude. It's the solitude of leadership. Because you're making an influence, an impact on the world intentionally. You're saying, I am not going to just do what everyone says. I'm going to live according to who I am, what my name is in God, the one that God made me to be. Well, that means that at that moment, people are going to look at you and say, well, are you sure? And, there's risk involved when you do that. Are you ready to take the consequences for really making a decision? And remember that if you don't make any decisions and you just are like, a dead fish floating down the river, that also is a decision. And there are consequences to that too, I kind of think, I would like to just kind of challenge you with this. Is it really that much better to go risk-free, pain-free through life at the expense of your freedom, of knowing who you are, of living authentically out of your identity, of possessing your name? You know what I mean? Like, remember what Jesus says, right? He says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? Well, in the same way, what would it profit us if we gained everything else on the side, but we actually lost our identity? Is if you had a peaceful existence, but you yourself didn't really exist. You know what I mean? It wouldn't profit you much. Well, but the times where you actually make a decision, this is the person I'm going to marry. This is the married person that I'm going to remain faithful to in good times and in bad, all the way till we're dead. Whether it's, sometimes people get married and it's like, we say it's for better or for worse. Well, sometimes it's kind of for the worst, And now you can't be in everything for the better. Sometimes in some ways, you end up just really suffering. Yeah, so what are you going to do at that moment? You're going to stay? You're going to leave? Well, a lot of people say, I just can't take it. I don't know all this suffering. Well, if you make the stance of saying, I'm going to stay faithful in this marriage because it's who I am, and the commitments that I've made and the words that I've given to God, you know what you get in exchange? You get the dignity of saying, I made a choice. And the people say, well, you also get the hardships that come with it. There's a greater hardship that's going to come from never having fought for anything, never having suffered for anything in your life. That's greater than any of the pain that comes from when you do. It just really is. We weren't made to be neutral in life. And our modern American culture, unfortunately, in many ways kind of allows us to be. And if you think about the way that we educate children, it's like, well, if you just do what the teacher says, then you're going to be fine and safe. And then the teachers, of course, typically, well, they feel bad kind of saying anyone is more special than someone else or deserves a special recognition for more than someone else. And of course, there's age appropriate, ways to do this. But when everybody gets a blue ribbon all the time for simply staying in conformity with the zeitgeist or the culture that's around them, there's a lot of good that happens, but there's also something that we lose. The thrill of making a decision and embracing the risks that come with it because we're following our love. That's what we could lose. And when we look at Jesus Christ and Christianity, he's extraordinary because that's the one thing that he asks them to do. If you notice, he never promises comfort. But the one thing he says to them is, follow me. Follow me. Can you imagine? And now, sell what you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. I mean, what a wild man Jesus Christ is. What a wild proposition Jesus offers to his disciples. He's like, I want you to decide from the heart, from the inside, that you will love me more than yourselves. And that you'll be willing to pour your life out for other people. Now, do you want that kind of love? And you look, you're like, well, I mean, like, what does that look like? He says, it looks going to look like the cross. Anyone who does not pick up his cross after me and follow me is not worthy of me, he says. And you might gain the whole world, but I would almost say, you can have the whole world, but give me that kind of love. Because I would hate to have a life that didn't have that kind of love in it. And if my life had that kind of love in it, well, then I'd have all the living and all the life I could possibly take. I mean, it's an amazing proposition. And it's a lesson that Jesus teaches us in a very comfortable culture that we live in. And there's nothing wrong with, comfort or success, except this. It can kind of mute the soul if we're not careful. And muting the soul means it can keep us from risking the greater, more important, and more essential good things in life for the sake of hanging on to comfort and security. And if you think about this, like in a social level, this is something that we all face. I mean, when was the last time that you took a public stance with your friends for God's teaching about the beautiful ways to live life? And God's teachings on the different moral issues of the day. I mean, a lot of us, we kind of just, we hem and we haw. We don't take stances. We don't say things. Man, well, why not? Well, because, we just don't want to upset people. And I agree. We got to be careful, of course. No one wants to upset people, But if you live your whole life never upsetting anyone, I mean, at what expense have you done that? And maybe there were people that were counting on you to actually point them in the right direction, to say something that could educate them, to lift them out of their current status and way of seeing things, to live a better life. And you didn't do it. You know what I mean? So like inaction is also an action. Inaction is an action, right? So it's really not a question of whether or not I'm going to do something. It's what am I going to do? Because by doing nothing, I'm actually doing something. I'm doing nothing. Well, there's consequences to that, right? And on the other side, you say, well, Father Nathan, there's a lot more risk that could come my way for me following the wild biddings of love that have been spoken to me by the Holy Spirit, But like I'd like to say, I think that at that moment, if you follow those biddings, yes, the Holy Spirit of God will lead you on a wild life, but I'll tell you, He'll never leave you alone. We might be solitary with respect to everyone else, but we will never be solitary with respect to God. I will be with you always, even to the ends of the ages. And so I think there's a promise there for us to grasp and follow in the path that He trods for us. And I want to just talk to you more about this, because I think in this solitude of taking risks and the solitude of acting in accord with love, there's a union with Christ that's waiting for us. And I just want to develop that more with you.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
You know, as a priest, I get challenged a lot by people to try to make the gospel relevant. You know, it really fascinates me because you can have people whose parents were praying the rosary with them at night, you know, or who went to mass all the time as a kid, went to Catholic school, and then they get to be 50, 60, 70, and they hardly have any faith left. But they'll say, well, I kind of have faith more or less, you know, but like they don't go to church, they don't pray, you know, you wonder if a priest is even going to be there at their funeral. And I kind of wonder, why is that the case? What's happened along the way? And so whenever I ask, and of course I do, what an interesting dinner guest, you know, invite Father Nathan over, you know, because I'll ask the craziest questions, you know, but I like to learn from people just to see what their journey has brought them to and why they've come to be the people they are. And it is, I just want to say this in passing, it is interesting. A lot of folks are not happy with who they are. You know, it's like, well, I'm like, well, if you're not happy with who you are, why don't we make some new choices? You know, maybe we can find the path, you know? And yet the older that you get, the harder it is to take that energy. It's almost like a selfishness that kind of settles in to folks. And it's just, you know, as you get older, just a little warning for you, you know, it kind of happens, you know, and yet be careful of that. That to keep your heart young, you have to keep love in it. And love is the one thing that God promises you. He's like, yeah, life might not be easy, and you might not have ups, you know, all the time, and all kinds of things can happen. But I promise you this: if you have love, you'll have life. And I'm here bidding you to love me. They asked Jesus, what's the commandment, Jesus? What's the greatest commandment, the thing that we're supposed to do in life? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your soul and all your heart and all your mind and all your strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, whoa. You know, it sounds so simple, and we say, isn't that beautiful? I mean, but what if we tried it? I just kind of wonder, like, what if you tried it? What if you said, okay, that's all I got to do? The thing that God told me to do was to love him with everything I've got. I mean, what would your life look like? You know, what kind of adventures would you find yourself on if you literally loved Jesus that much? It would be really interesting, wouldn't it? You know, and I think about that because when the Lord gave that commandment, he was giving the key to relevance for himself. Remember that Jesus was an evangelizer, right? And what was he selling? He was selling a relationship with himself. He wasn't selling it, right? You know, what was he promulgating, right? What was he trying to convince us to do? You know, and if you looked at just real practical terms, he was initiating a change on the earth, and the change was, I want you to follow me. I want you to know my way of life, and I want you to love me this much. And he stretches out his arms and he dies for us. It says, now I want you to do that for each other. So this is quite a philosophy, quite a way of life that he was promulgating. He was trying to convince us to do. Well, how did he make himself relevant to do it? You know, like what was the technique that he asked for? So as a priest, again, my job is to promote this. And so I've studied his life, and I said, well, Jesus, what did he leave me with as a mode to convince people to accept this radical proposition? And I believe it's this, that the relevance of Christ in our life is correlative to his commandment to love. That if we take that great commandment into our lives, we'll find ourselves with him. We're forced to face straight on with Jesus. When he says, love your neighbor as yourself, that's impossible. And because later on, he perfects it and he says, love one another as I have loved you. Well, now it's even more, because you're just like, to love one as Jesus loved me. Well, how did Jesus love me? He gave his body and his blood for me. You know, he laid his life down on the cross. Even though I was part of the reason he was on that cross, yet he endured it for me. And he forgave me for my sins, no matter what I did in my life. And then he says, I want you to give that love to each other. Wow, that's quite a challenge. Right? You say, well, if I embrace it, what will my life look like? Well, number one, it'll look like a life in union with Christ, because you're going to say, there's no way I can do that commandment on my own. And you're right. No one can give that love on their own. That's the whole beautiful point. He's literally saying, I'm going to command you to do something for which you need me in an absolute way in order to accomplish it. Now, just think about that. And you're like, well, that's kind of like because like, you see, when you walk on my path, I will walk with you every step of the way. Because I'm not asking you to do something on your own. I'm asking you to do something with me. Now, go back now a step to what we're talking about with leadership. Because when you lead, you take risks. You put yourself out there. You sign that mortgage, and now you've got to pay the mortgage every month, which means that you now have to do all kinds of other things. And if you don't reach that mortgage, you'll lose the house. Right? There's a risk to buying a house. There's a risk to taking a wedding vow. There's a risk to consecrating yourself, to Christ as a consecrated virgin. There's entering religious life. There's risks all through life, taking a stance in a social setting to witness to God. Yeah, there's risks everywhere. Everywhere you want to make an impact that comes from love, there will be risk. Here's the thing, though. When the love that you are following is the love of Christ, then the risk is taken with Jesus. And there you've got something that's an amazing guarantee. He said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I want to be yoked to you. I don't want you to think you're walking through this leadership alone. What you do for me, I do with you. And in fact, what you do for me, you're doing with me and in me as much as you're doing it for me. Because without me, you can do nothing. You are the branches, right? And I'm the vine. So even though you're bearing fruit and you think, oh gosh, this is quite an effort to do, and there's all kinds of ups and downs and scary things around me, when this my fruit that you're trying to bear, it's because you are remaining in me, the vine, which means I've got this. Right? It's a whole different attitude to take. Because then, yeah, there are risks, but when your soul is in that much peace, the peace of knowing that what you're doing for Jesus, that then it's almost like the risk becomes easy to bear because things might happen. The losses might have to be borne. But when you're bearing them with Christ and that he's never going to leave you, right? Then in a sense, like everything becomes victory. Everything becomes prayer. Because everything is full of that love and flows from that love. My friends, this is why we need to lead. We need to stop sitting back acting like the world should be run by people who just want to gratify themselves by running it. And when I say the world, I don't mean big picture. I mean small picture. I mean your HOA. I mean your YMCA. I mean your family circle. My goodness. When we look back and we say, who is it that's influencing our culture today? And everyone shakes their head and says, all these bad people are influencing. Can you believe the Super Bowl halftime show is so bad? I'm like, I could believe it. I decided to do my own. It's true. It's just a little passing story. Like I got fired up because I said the Super Bowl halftime show has become this celebration of societal decadence. Well, the heck with it. Why are we all watching it? And I was like, well, it's the only thing on. So you know what I did in my ministry here at St. John Leadership Network? We said, we're going to do a holy halftime show. You can tune in every Super Bowl. Go to my social media. I'm on there live doing a holy halftime show. And it's fantastic. And it's a lot of fun. And well, why? Because I'm like, why should we let those people dictate our culture? All that's necessary is for someone in love with Christ to stand up and take a hold of that culture. It's like that old saying, right? It's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. You see, but what happens when you light a candle? Well, you put your skin in the game. Well, that's very scary. You put your skin in the game and you might get burned, right? And so you're like, oh, I don't know. It's easier to sit back and complain about the way things are or to comment on the news than to actually make it. I get it. It is easier. It's just also lower. Aim for the higher things, my friends. Aim for the higher things. Why would we go through our life just totally passive, letting everybody else run this world when we are the Christians that God sent to redeem it in his name. You know, and that's the great glory of a Christian. What's it going to take? It's going to take courage. And that's where we meet Christ, in the courage to stand alone with him in the face of any wind that will blow.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So I want to talk with you about courage. And it's a word that it's fascinating, right? It comes from the Latin word from cor, C-O-R, right? Cor. And then that's just become morphed into the French language of cœur, right? And from the French into the English, cour, right? Courage. Courage. And what does it mean, courage? It means to be hardy. And the Greek equivalent for courage is literally, it's a verb that says, build up your chest. To build up, it doesn't mean the muscles of your chest. It means to build up that fiery center of your person where the passions lie. So when Jesus says, take courage, what he's saying in Greek is build up the fire inside, right? Take heart is what we say in English. And so to take heart, yeah, it means to live from your center of love, right? That's amazing. Because why? In your center of love, where you've got that heart of yours, is peace. A person will know peace inside when they live following that heart, right? If you've got love inside your heart, then you have peace. And it's a peace that Jesus promises to his apostles. He says, the world can't give you peace like this. And you say, well, I mean, like I can, kind of. And you're like, well, I can, kind of, right? I'm not saying, there's not peace, looking at your olive trees growing in your backyard as your little orange cat, comes up at your lap and you're drinking lemonade as you quietly listening to opera, right? But that's not the type of peace that he's promising. What about a peace because that type of peace, something could take away. If you don't have your olive trees or your cat or your opera or your iced tea, well, then you don't have that peace. Yeah, but is there a type of peace that you can have always, no matter what? And I want you to think about this, because Jesus says, I'm going to give you a peace the world cannot give. And the peace that he gives us, no one can take away from us. Well, what kind of peace could that be? It's obviously not going to be a peace that's on the outside, dependent on our things. It must be a peace that's on the inside, that flows from our heart. Oh, okay. Well, what's that peace? Well, how do we get that? What is that? Well, he promises that if we are in him, he will give us that peace. And I think I know what it is. It's the peace that's at the heart of a leader who is living their life out of love. And what I mean by that is that when we have that conviction that what we're doing is right, and the reason we're doing it is good, and the benefits from us doing it for other people are astounding, then we know deep down inside that it's something that we have to do, that we must do. And there's a peace that comes that says, yeah, I don't know how much this is going to cost me. I don't know what the difficulties and challenges I'm going to face, but I know this, I have to do it. It's just something I have to do. And by pursuing that kind of hero's journey, right, of going off to fight the big dragon that's threatening the city, even though it's at the cost of your own life, or you risk all kinds of pain. But when like a hero in the myths who do those types of journey, that This is something that you have to do. There's a peace the world cannot give. Nothing in the world can replace that peace. And I'm here to say, for a Christian, that's our life. That everything that we do can indeed flow from that kind of peace. It actually can. You're like, oh, I don't believe it. You can believe it. Like, think what this means. Why? Because everything that we do, if we do it in freedom, out of love, comes from us. I mean, it comes from Jesus inside of us, right? But we own it inside. It's like, I get a life because I've chosen to have a soul. And I have a soul because I've chosen to give love to Jesus and to let him be the center of my being. The more that I have that love, the more that I have that soul, the more that I have that life, it's just amazing. The more that I have that peace. I think it's kind of funny when I think about peace, because a lot of times people think that peace means, just kind of like coasting. And no, there's nothing more explosive and dynamic than peace. When someone has found that kind of peace, when they have found their love, watch out. Because the life that's going to flow from a man in love changes the world. And history is written by souls that have surrendered to love. It's written by people who've embraced the solitude of their identity in action. It's written by people who have jumped into action because they realized that they never jump alone.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.